2024 is advancing slowly but surely, and surprisingly it's already almost the end of May. So in today's video I want to talk about my favorite books so far of 2024. So hello my fellow fantasy book lovers and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi and welcome. My name is Kathy, I'm a god girl from Belgium who loves reading fantasy books. Today's video is not going to be super long because as of today I have only read 3 books that I gave a 5-star rating. And I think one of the reasons that this year I've been getting a lot less 5-star reads than last year is because last year I really went through a list of books that one of my best friends recommended me, and I really went based off of like her opinion a little bit as well, and then everything was new to me. And this year I feel like I've been reading a lot of books that I maybe haven't done enough research beforehand before getting them and reading them, so I feel a little bit let down by some of the books. So with that disclaimer out of the way, I might just also be a very critical reader, and I know what I like and I know what I want from a book, so that doesn't always help either. Without further ado, book number 1, of course, I need to talk about is Empire of the Damned by J. Kristoff. Empire of the Vampire was one of my discoveries last year. It blew me away. It's one of my favorite books ever, and Empire of the Damned is the second part in what's going to be a trilogy. Now, Empire of the Damned does have a little bit of middle book syndrome, as in it doesn't pull you in quite like the first one did, and it does need to set the scene for the final things that are about to happen in book number 3. I loved Empire of the Damned. There were so many twists and turns in it that I just felt like I didn't see coming, and I loved it and I just wanted more from it. So Empire of the Damned by J. Kristoff, hands down one of my favorite books that I've read this year. If you haven't read Empire of the Vampire yet, I could highly recommend picking it up. It is a dark world with vampires in it. The main character is Gabriel de Leon. He is the last Silver Saint, and the book is written in this interview style, and in the second book the interview takes a little bit of a turn, and at first I didn't know how to feel about that turn, but towards the end of the book I really enjoyed it, and it made the pacing a lot smoother as well. So yeah, for me, this book was yet another amazing book by J. Kristoff. I also love the Nevernight trilogy, but Empire of the Vampire, Empire of the Damned just hits differently. It just feels like reading Tolkien for the first time again, if that makes any sense, and I just can't wait to see how it continues. Now, the next book on my list is also a vampire-themed book, and it is a little bit different from Empire of the Damned. It is Bride by Ailey Hazelwood. Now, the name Ailey Hazelwood might ring a bell for you. It's because she's actually a romance author, and Ailey Hazelwood tipped her toes into fantasy romance. In this book, we follow the main character. She's called Misery, and she is a vampire girl, so she is like a young vampire, and her parents have actually used her previously as collateral, or as like a peacemaking offer between the humans and the vampires. So there's human, vampire and werewolf, and the 3 of them have to kind of like live in peace, and to make sure that that peace actually happens, vampires and humans have kind of this collateral. So a vampire child goes to live with humans for 10 years, I think it is, and a human child goes to live with vampires for 10 years, and it's kind of like their way of saying that they won't harm each other. So Misery has already been this collateral between humans and vampires. She was actually raised a big part of her life with humans, and she actually decided after that period was over to stay with humans. Now she gets called back home to her family because something is going on, and there she discovers that now she's going to be the bride to the werewolf alliance that they are trying to create. So the vampire with a werewolf, and a person of the werewolf clan will stay with the vampires in exchange as well. So this is the basic premises of the book. You really get to know our main character. I felt like the main character had a lot of character to her and a lot of decent backstory. It all made sense. There is a certain mystery aspect to the book, as certain things don't really go the way they should be going. And of course the main plotline is the romance between the vampire bride and the werewolf groom, and like, does he like her? Does he not like her? There is this whole bonding situation, and there is also a certain kink that is very well represented in this book, and it is the knotting kink. If you don't know anything about it, I would recommend looking it up before reading the book, because it will make some explanations a little bit easier. And if you read the explanations and you're like, the hell, then maybe this is not the book for you. I personally really enjoyed it. I felt it came at the right time and at the right pacing and everything. It's really well written for me in terms of books that I like to read. It read very fast, it read very smoothly. You do notice that this is not a fantasy author writing a romance book. That's the only thing about it that I could maybe say, is that you do really notice that it is written as a romance and there just happen to be characters in it that are vampire, werewolf, etc. And then the last book that I want to talk about, no surprises here, is another vampire themed book. This one is called 6 Scorched Roses by Carissa Broadbent, and if you've seen any of my videos with books that I like this year, it has been in it. This book takes place in the same realm as Serpent and the Wings of Night, so you do have a few elements, if you have read Serpent and the Wings of Night, that will make sense, especially towards the end of the book, but you don't really have to have read those books in order to enjoy 6 Scorched Roses. In 6 Scorched Roses, we follow Lilith, and she is trying to find a cure for the curse that a god put onto their lands X amount of years ago, and you will discover more about that curse. Now, in order to find a cure for the people who are getting sick due to this curse, she is trying all sorts of solutions. She actually has like a lab set up where she does testing, etc. And she thinks that to find a solution, she needs vampire blood. Now, luckily, there happens to be one vampire in their proximity, and she goes knocking on his door to ask for help. And in exchange for his blood, she offers him 6 roses. And these roses, they have something special about them, which you will notice later on in the book. And of course, between these two characters, a romance starts to form, and I really enjoyed it. I love the way that it builds up, the way that it's formed, the way that it's connected to each other. I really enjoyed this book. It was one of my favorite reads, hence why it's in this video. And I felt for how short this book is, it has a lot of story in it. So if you want a fast read that does leave you satisfied, then I would highly recommend this book. It has a little bit of spice, but not a lot of them. However, considering it's a small book, it might seem like a lot, but honestly, it wasn't. And I know this is a very small amount of books that I actually gave the full 5 stars, so I will quickly go over my list of 4-star books so far this year as well. The first one is Serpent and the Wings of Night. It is a Hunger Games trial kind of situation with a human girl and vampires. It is set in a vampire-based world where she is actually raised by one of the vampire lords. I gave it a 4 stars because I felt it focused a lot on the trial, and then on the end of the book a lot of things happened very quickly, and we know there is a second part, but I felt like it ended too abruptly for me. Now, I get it, I know you need a cliffhanger in order to get to book 2, but for me it was a little bit frustrating, and I also felt like the main character lacked a little bit of personality. Of course, my opinion. Another 4-star read was A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. In this book we have the content written as a letter to herself from Constanta, who was one of Dracula's brides. This is a very heavy book. It is very trauma-based. It talks about toxic relationship with Dracula that she has. The name Dracula is never actually mentioned in this book, but of course we know it because we all know the Dracula story. So yeah, I really loved this book, but I felt it was a little bit dark and it lacked a little bit of, again, it has a certain ending, but I felt not super... I love this book. I am like very happy that I read it, but it lacked something for me. I can't like pinpoint what, but it lacked something. Then we have Silver in the Bone, which is a YA fantasy. It is a epic YA fantasy, which has a lot of Arthurian themes. So we follow the main character, Tamsin, and her brother as they're trying to find out what happened to their guardian X amount of years ago, and they go on this quest to try and figure that out. And somehow they end up into this other realm, and a lot of things happen there as well. Now, this was an epic fantasy, but it felt YA, and sometimes when you're reading a YA book you can't really tell, but with this book I really felt it. And then a few things happened that haven't been explained. I know there's a second book coming out August this year, and maybe I would have liked it more if I would have had book 1 and book 2 immediately after each other, but now it leaves a lot of questions and a lot of ifs and whats, and I want to know more about this world, although it was a super good book. Another 4-star read for me was Ruthless Vows, the second book in the Divine Rivals duology. I liked it, but for me it was too war-oriented. So if you like war-themed stories and romances that take place in a warlike situation, then I think you will like this. For me personally, I felt like it was too depressing somehow. It kind of pulled down my mood a lot because of the war situation, and of course there's war happening in the world. And I just feel like, no. For me personally, it wasn't a book that I particularly enjoyed, and I have the duology. I'm gonna keep holding on to them for a little bit longer, but honestly, it's even books that I might consider getting rid of because I'm sure I won't reread them anytime soon, and not like I have so many books that I prefer to read over these. The next book is also an ending to a duology. This one was called These Twisted Bonds by Lexi Ryan. Now, the first one was These Ruthless Vows, and I really did enjoy it. I think I gave it a 3 or 4 stars as well. It is fantasy-based with fae, and in the second book we build onto what has happened in the first one. But if I want to talk about that, then I will spoil how the first book ends, so I'm not going to do that. Let's just keep it at that. The world building was amazing in book 2. I really loved how deep they went with certain like relationship type of things. They explored the realms of relationships with other people and how that can work, etc. So I really enjoyed this book. Again, it is a YA book. It touches on subjects that I feel maybe have been a little bit too deep for a YA book, but I did end up really enjoying it. And this is a duology that maybe someday I would actually read again. In March, I also read Mountain Made of Glass by Scarlett St. Clair that I gave a 4 stars. This is one of her fairy tale retellings, and at first I thought this was going to be a standalone, but there is a second book in these fairy tale retellings coming out again. We follow a girl who has a village that has like all of these curses happening to them, and for every curse there is kind of a solution that the village offers or a sacrifice that they make. And for this particular one, the well is dry, so the town well where the water comes from, and the main girl that we follow is appointed to get rid of the frog that is in this well. Now she kills the frog eventually. She really tries not to, but on accident it happens, and it turns out that he was actually an elf king, and now she's confronted by his brothers and she needs to be punished for killing one of their brothers and go to the castle of one of them and just like go through a certain trial to kind of have redemption for what happened. Now, of course, more happens in this book. There is a lot of like stories mixed into it, and I really enjoyed it. So if you're into fairy tale retellings, this has a quite strong romance line in it as well. And I could highly recommend it. It was also a very short read. So if you want just something short and sweet in between, I would highly recommend Mountains Made of Glass. And then my most recent 4-star read was The Scarlet Veil, in which we follow a girl named Celie. Celie, in her past, her sister actually got murdered by a witch, and Celie actually helped afterwards to actually get rid of that witch who killed her sister. And after that, she applied for a job to actually be a chasseur, which is a hunter in English, and they actually hunt down creatures and supernatural beings that have done crimes or that are not in a place that they want to be. Example, the field is infested with pixies. They need to move the pixies to another spot where they can live. So in this book we follow Celie as she is kind of an apprentice with the chasseur. She is still being introduced to the world, and her fiancé Jean-Luc is actually the head of the chasseur. So he is really like managing things there. And we notice very quickly on in the book that they actually have been keeping back from Celie a lot. She hasn't been getting the training. They have been really like paying good attention to her to not have her be confronted with a lot of things. When she discovers this, she actually runs away and she gets kidnapped by vampires who take her away from where she was. And then you see this whole plot line around the vampires happening that is related to what was happening where she was with the chasseur. Maybe a little bit of a difficult explanation, but once you start reading this book, it will go very fast. It's a chunk of a book. I read it in 2 weeks, but I'm reading quite slowly nowadays because I got a new job. But I really love this book. The only reason I gave it 4 stars and not 5 is because I wanted more. Especially towards the end of the book, a lot of things happen again really fast and there isn't enough explanation, and I need a book too. So hopefully book 2 comes someday, and I would really like to read it. And I think if book 2 continues on building on what they have in book 1, then I think that would be a 5-star for me. So these are my current favorite books of 2024. I hope this video helps you finding new books to read this year. And of course, feel free to share with me what were your favorite reads so far in 2024. What books could you recommend me checking out? Of course, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already and you'd like to be, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I make new videos every week and I would love to have you for every single one of them. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye!